Hello, everyone. This is Jose Palomino with another exciting episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. Our guest today is Wendy Weiss, the queen of cold calling. Wendy makes cold calling, reaching out, appointment setting, she makes it make sense. If you're an owner with a small sales team, or you're the person that actually has to make it rain for your company, you must listen to this episode. There are insights, practical to-dos, things you can apply right away. So stay tuned, listen in, and let's welcome Wendy to our show. Well, welcome, Wendy, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here today. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. So Wendy, one thing that's helpful for our listeners, just to provide context, is if you could just tell us a little bit about who you work with and what do you primarily focus on for them, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. First of all, I am the founder of the Salesology Prospecting Method, and we work with business owners and sales managers that are just sick of micromanaging salespeople that are not producing. And we teach a very simple 3-step method that on average increases qualified appointments and then sales by 73% without having to micromanage salespeople.
Well, so I love that phrasing there, without having to micromanage salespeople. So if an owner is listening to this, how does that manifest typically? How do they say, well, am I micromanaging my salespeople? What are some things that might be tells, like, okay, you may not have been clued in on this, but you are micromanaging your salespeople. How does that show up?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. When you think about hiring a salesperson, I'm going to take a step back from your question.
Okay, sure.
When you think about hiring a salesperson, that's an expensive proposition. It's not just placing an ad. It's somebody's got to interview them. Somebody's got to go through the resumes when they're hired. Somebody's got to train them. Somebody's got to supervise them. There's revenue that you expect them to produce. If they're not producing, that's lost revenue. And then I read a study recently that said something like 78% of newly hired salespeople are gone within 3 years. Either they've been fired or they leave. So it's an expensive proposition to hire salespeople. And what too many business owners do is they hire someone with their fingers crossed. And then the micromanaging part is, well, what are you doing? And did you reach out to prospects? And but they're not necessarily giving them the tools that they need to be successful. And so the business owner has a lot of anxiety because they've hired someone that isn't actually producing for them, but they don't have the things in place for that newly hired salesperson to actually be productive. And so that's the problem that we fix.
So they could, that business owner, and I'm visualizing a few of my client history, they can see a new hire on the production floor tied to the P&L right away, right? It allows me to produce more widgets or more work and so on. It's billable time. That's easy. But I'm hiring a new salesperson. That may be 6 months to productivity or whatever it is, depending on the sales cycle they're involved in. So I'm investing, and I want to make sure they're making calls. I want to make sure they're sending emails. In fact, I like to read those emails to make sure they're good. So is that part of that micromanaging mindset?
That's part of the micromanaging mindset. And here's the other mistake that business owners make. They hire a new salesperson. They teach them every last thing that new salesperson needs to know about whatever it is they're selling, which could be a very time-consuming process. That might be 6 months right there before they're ready to go find clients. What we do is we use the ability to set an appointment, prospecting, as a litmus test to whether or not somebody is going to be successful, because you can teach someone, a brand new salesperson, to set a qualified appointment for someone else that knows what they're doing. You can teach them to do that in a matter of 2 or 3 months. That's what we do in our programs all the time, 2 or 3 months. You don't have to keep someone around for 3 years to find out that they cannot sell. And someone that can't set up a qualified appointment is really unlikely to be a great salesperson for you.
No matter how much you invest in product knowledge in them.
Right. And that's the huge mistake. Teach them all the product knowledge. That takes 6 months, it takes a year, or it takes however long it takes.
Right.
And then they can't sell anything. Teach them to set an appointment. And once they are successfully setting appointments, then you can teach them everything else they need to know.
So Wendy, it sounds like the idea of setting an appointment is kind of like the foundational sales skill. It's like the cornerstone that you build a sales process around. Is that a fair read?
Absolutely, because let me give you my definition of the word appointment. Because pre-COVID, a lot of people were just, they'd get in their car and they'd go see the prospect. And of course, that changed with COVID. My definition of the word appointment is that the prospect agrees to have an in-depth conversation with the salesperson about whatever it is they're selling. That's what the word appointment means. It means the agreement to have the conversation. Where that conversation happens is less important. Maybe the salesperson gets in their car and goes to see someone. Maybe they do it all over the phone. Maybe they do a Zoom call. But that the prospect has agreed to have that conversation. And let's face it, if you can't get the agreement to have a conversation with a prospect, you're not going to be able to get them as a client.
Right. So a poorly set appointment could be somebody to shoo the salesperson off the phone, agree to, yeah, whatever, we'll do something next Wednesday. And then now, let's say the boss gets in, who has the product knowledge, and then it doesn't go anywhere because they didn't really agree. Is that
exactly? Exactly. And I can give you a concrete example of that. Another mistake I see a lot. Business owners that think their salespeople have closing problems when they actually have prospecting problems. I had a client who came to me and had a new salesperson and said, well, I don't really think he has a problem with prospecting. He gets a lot of appointments. He just has a problem with closing. Well, it turned out this guy worked in a bar at night. He moonlighted as a bartender. So he set appointments with people in the bar who then would not show up or weren't really interested because they were drinking in a bar.
That's a true story. So
that is a true story. This salesperson did not have a closing problem. He had a prospecting problem.
You may have had a couple of other problems too.
But the business owner thought he had a closing problem. He wanted to enroll him in a program to teach him sales skills to close. That was not what he needed.
Right. So let's take a look at the appointment setting thing, because I think some owners who might be listening to this podcast might say, I have one salesperson, I have 2 or 3, I don't have any. I have to make these appointments. I have to make it happen. And yet, and I think we've talked about this before, the elephant in the room is that people don't like to make that call to see if you want to have a call, or they don't like to do that initial outreach. It'd rather it all be inbound, right? Content marketing, people read my ebook and they can't wait to talk to me, so they ask for an appointment. That's the perfect world. And yet there's a value in reaching out, obviously. So how do you help people overcome what may be a deep-seated fear of whatever, rejection, a hostile call, whatever? How do you get over that to start this activity?
That's a great question, because that is the elephant in the room. So I'm going to give you a 2-part answer. Okay. And the first part of the answer is that the conversation about cold calling is really stupid most of the time, because it's always love it or hate it. That most people hate it, and then there's a handful of people that love it. I am not here to tell anybody they should love to do this. The opposite of hating to cold call is not that you now love it or your salespeople love it. The opposite is to be neutral. This is a business process. It is a business process to get new clients. That's all it is. And so when we work with our clients, we help them achieve that neutral emotional state so that they can do what they need to do and be really successful. So how do we do that? In my experience, and I have been doing this for about 25 years now, there are some people that no matter what you do, they will never pick up the phone and talk to a stranger. Mm-hmm. Those people will not be successful salespeople. No matter what you do, they're not going to be successful. But for everybody else, once they learn a very simple step-by-step system, and they know what they're going to do every step along the path, and they know what they're going to say, and they know how they're going to say it, that fear goes away. Because if you think about it, when you say to a new salesperson, go make some phone calls, there's a lot of decisions you're asking them to make. Well, who are they going to call? Mm-hmm. And what are they going to say if they get someone on the phone? And what if they get voicemail? Did they leave a voicemail? Should they send them an email? Well, what should they do if they leave a voicemail? Should they call them again? What if they get voicemail again? Did they leave another voicemail? There's so many questions. So, and they're not equipped to answer them. So when somebody learns a very step-by-step system, then that fear just goes away. When we call our program 3X appointments, because people typically, if they're already doing business development, their numbers triple. And at the end of the program, I ask each participant, what has changed for you? And even the ones that were terrified at the beginning, they all say some version of, oh, well, no, I just call up the prospect and I say what I have to say, and then they book an appointment. And they kind of say it like that. They're very blasé, because they're no more, they're not worried about anything. They know what's going to happen.
So it seems like a lot of the fear, or what people would think they're afraid of, the cold call, is really the uncertainty of being asked to do something that you don't know that you're equipped to be successful at, the steps and
Exactly.
all those pause questions. And if you have to make 100 calls, and each one you have to you're kind of calculating that thing all over again each time, because no one's told you this is the process to follow. That's very stressful. At the end of the day, you're kind of frazzled at that point, and maybe a little beat up by the process because you didn't have a process.
Exactly. And this is a lot. You didn't ask me this, Jose, but actually my first career, I danced in a ballet company.
Wow.
That was my first career. Call reluctance is like stage fright.
Okay.
I've been there. You're waiting in the wings. You're waiting for your music, for your cue to go on, and your heart's pounding, your palms are sweaty. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: you've been rehearsing for months, so you have muscle memory, and you've trained as a dancer. It takes a long time to train a ballet dancer. You've trained, so you have your craft. And you have rehearsed and practiced your choreography. So you've got the muscle memory, and you hear your musical cue. And even though your heart's pounding and your palms are sweaty, you get out on stage and you dance. Because what enables you to get through that stage fright is that you've learned your craft and you've practiced and you have the muscle memory, and you get out on stage and you dance and the fear goes away. And it's really the same thing, only a much easier process than training as a ballet dancer.
Not the 20 years of training.
Yeah, it won't take you that long. But it's essentially the same thing. Learn the craft, practice the craft so that you get the muscle memory, execute, and then tweak. That's what we do when we're ballet dancers after the performance. The next day you go to rehearsal, and the rehearsal director says, we have to fix this, and we have to fix this, and and you do a post-performance review, and that only makes you better.
Well, now, one thing that's interesting, though, Wendy, and I'd like to maybe for you to talk to this. And first of all, I think that's great. The idea that practice makes perfect is like not, I guess Ben Franklin said that, right? So it's still true. But there are people, and I've known this, I've even sent out like business letters, very professional business letters, and I've gotten them sent back to me with handwritten notes of like angry, like don't ever do this again. I'm thinking like, what's wrong with humanity? Like that people would take the time to send me that back. So the reality is people making calls are often afraid of the hostile reaction. something that's just like heated and people almost offended that you dare to call them. Although they have a business phone, they still react that way at times. How would you tell somebody to process that? How do you get past that? Because I could see that knocking somebody out of the box. If that's their first 5 calls, they end up with that kind of reaction.
Okay. One of the really, I said earlier that the conversation about cold calling is often stupid. One of the really stupid things that people say about cold calling is that it's about going through the no's and the hang-ups until you get to somebody that says yes.
Sure, that's very common.
Which, like who in their right mind wants to do that? So the first thing you have to look at, this is kind of like real life. People react to what you say. So if everyone that you talk to says, I'm not interested, and slams down the phone, that means you're not saying anything interesting and you need to come up with a new script. In our programs, we get very granular about what people are saying for exactly this reason. When you get the messaging right, it's really amazing. You get someone on the phone, you get the right someone on the phone, you say what you have to say, they will book an appointment. Every once in a while, you're correct. Every once in a while, you're going to run into somebody that's a jerk, just like real life.
Just like real life.
And, it doesn't really happen all that often. I've been doing this for, 25 years. Maybe it's happened 6 times. It just is not, it is a process of targeting well, making sure you're reaching out to the right people and then having something compelling to say to them.
Wow. Well, to that end, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier about practice, right? So again, let's visualize that small team, owner, 3 or 4 people trying to make appointment setting or ostensibly handling territory. What's a good way for them to practice doing is just make more calls, or do you believe in kind of doing any kind of role playing? Is that helpful in this context?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do a lot of role playing. And one of the things that we do is we help everyone in our program create scripts. And here's one of the things, there's 2 things. Sometimes people will say to me, well, I don't want my people to have scripts because then they're going to sound phony. And I would argue that having a script simply means that your people are prepared. Mm-hmm. They can be their best selves. That said, a script is not something that you read word for word. Hello, sir or madam, may I have a moment of your time? That's not a script. The script has to be conversational. It has to be written the way someone would talk. Mm-hmm. And the script it has a point. If your goal is to set an appointment, everything that you say drives towards getting the appointment. And it's not about anything else. And people make it's both very complicated and very simple at the same time. Jose, I think of this like dating. Okay. If you want to go on a date with someone, you've got to ask them.
That's a good step, right?
And prospecting is asking for the date. Selling is like going on the date. Okay. And the way most people approach prospecting is, hey, Jose, what are you doing Saturday night? Let's go would you like to see a movie with me? And I want to meet everyone in your family and know your entire life history and what's your favorite color and what's your favorite food. And I want you to meet my entire family. That's how most people approach prospecting. That doesn't work.
It's too much of it.
It's too much.
Too much on the front end.
Yeah. And prospecting is, would you like to go see a movie on Saturday night with me?
And that's a yes, no, not really. Not that movie, not you, or whatever, right? It could be any of those things, but it's not writing, solving world hunger. It's a simple thing.
It's very simple. And sometimes people will say to me, well, we have a script. And I'll say, good. What happens when your salespeople use it? Because if you have a script and prospects are hanging up on them or saying, I'm not interested, or refusing to engage, or they're not setting any appointments, your script doesn't work.
Right. So that's the evidence right there that
Yeah.
you work on the script there, right?
Yeah.
You should be able to get people's attention, at least the right, if you, again, the right audience, you said, right audience for the right message, and keep it simple. Well, Wendy, we're just about out of time for this episode. Fantastic insights right here, and I could think of like 50 more questions to ask on this topic. So if our listeners wanted to know more about you, about your work, about how to just contact you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, come visit me at my website, which is coldcallingresults.com. And we also have a gift for our audience today. I believe you're going to post it with the show notes.
Yes.
A business owner's guide to scheduling more qualified appointments when their prospects are all completely freaking out. And that's 12 steps for getting more sales today. It's got actionable information that you can start implementing, your sales team can start implementing right away.
So fantastic. So for our listeners, it's coldcallingresults.com.
That's our website.
That's your website. Yeah. And then we'll have the guide on our show notes that you can find and download as a gift from Wendy. So Wendy, first of all, just thank you for the gift of your time, your insights today on this call. Thank you for making that guide available to our listeners, and really appreciate you and making the time for being on the Revenue Throughput podcast today.
Thank you.